Welcome back to the Dimensional Liaison. And I am your hostess, Anna. I am the Dimensional Liaison, which means I find ways to explain metaphysical and vibrational and psychic phenomena, all the weird ass shit that's going on in the world that you would like to understand, especially if it happens to be happening to you. So, welcome back to episode 2. And I think today we are going to talk about, well, let's talk about psychic gifting. So, we are all psychically gifted. That's just a given. Every baby that is born, they don't have language yet, but they are little pure bundles of pure love energy that have embodied in this little tiny wrinkled body. And you look into their eyes. If anybody's looked into the eyes of a newborn, you know what I mean. They are ancient. It's very obvious. So, what happens between childhood when children are able to, demonstrate all kinds of wild psychic gifts? I mean, some of them remember previous lifetimes and talk about it. Some of them remember what happened in the birthing room and who was there. They can describe it in detail. Some of them just are able to articulate the secrets in the family and come out with embarrassing statements of truth at the family gatherings that everybody suddenly freaks out about, and the kid gets punished. So, what happens to their psychic gifts after that? Well, usually they suppress them. By the time we get to adulthood, most of us don't even remember how sensitive we were as children. And so, what's going on in the world right now? There's a lot of people waking up to a recognition that they have psychic gifts activating. When it gets really active, you might even want to refer to that as a spiritual emergency, because it can be a little bit intrusive. Suddenly you're seeing auras around everybody, or maybe you're seeing ghosts. You're seeing entities wandering around in the reality, and you're like, what the? Am I going insane? And that does actually come up for a lot of people. They end up checking themselves in for mental health, they get medicated until the visions go away. And I think we have a profound misunderstanding, first of all, when we talk about mental illness, where we don't even know what we're talking about. We don't even know how to understand and describe neurodivergence really very well yet. We don't even understand how to treat complex PTSD for the most part. I mean, we try, but a lot of it is resorting to medication and is not healing. So, what about psychic gifts then? How do you use them? Are they useful for anything? Of course they are. Look at animals in the wild. They have highly sophisticated sensory apparatus and energy sensitivity to what's going on in the immediate environment around them. So, we are also mammals. We have these same innate abilities. We share that same DNA. We have that same potential, that same capacity for pure instinct and intuition. And we often don't use it. Most of us don't use it. Or even if we're aware that we have it, we don't trust it. So, what are we going to do with this? So you have psychic gifts that are emerging. Suddenly you're having weird dreams. You're dreaming about shit that's happening in the future. Or you look at somebody and you can see what they're lying about. Or you just know things. Maybe you hear voices. Maybe you just hear tones in your head. Maybe you can smell sickness on somebody. Pop it in the comments. Whatever you have going on, whatever you think your psychic gifting is, put it in the comments. I want to know what you are all working with here. So, How do you understand what your psychic gifting is? Well, I'm sure you've heard the term clairvoyance. A lot of people are clairvoyant. Now, that doesn't just mean that you can see ghosts and you can see auras or sacred geometry around people and living things, but it can mean that. It means also that your internal sight, your mind's eye, is very active. So, I don't know, have you ever daydreamed? Imagined a scenario in your head? Fantasized about, I don't really want to know what you're fantasizing about, but anything really. You have pictures in your head of how whatever it is going to look, how it's going to play out, whatever it is. So, yeah, you have internal sight. Anybody who has ever daydreamed or fantasized has internal sight. That, of course, is highly developed. A lot of people think that they don't have any sight, they can't see anything, and yet you're capable of having a daydream full of all kinds of detail. So that's your internal sight. You ever notice that, somebody says something, you might have like a momentary flash in your third eye, in your head. You just have like an image of something. Sometimes the image might be in the format of a cartoon. So what does that mean? Well, usually those kinds of internal imagery that flashes in your head, and you got to be paying attention. You got to be living in the present to notice when you get these little flashes of imagery going through your head, or a sense of knowing even. But let's talk about imagery first, because we're talking about clairvoyance and how that works. So you get a flash of imagery. What does that mean? Well, say you get a little scene from Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner, like the Roadrunner cartoons, the coyote and the Roadrunner. Maybe the, coyote having an anvil drop on him or falling through a hole in the road that the Roadrunner left. Whatever. These kinds of things. What does that mean to you? That's what the information is showing you. Whatever it has meaning for you specifically, how you interpret that image is how you use that internal sight to tell you what's going on in the world. It's just an extra layer of information. So, science fiction movies, they have those computers that are like these clear panels, like in, I'm pretty sure they exist now, but, only really rich people have them. But, these like clear interfaces where you're just moving things around in the air holographically. Well, we already have that. It's built in. It's part of the equipment. We just don't know how to use it. So those momentary flashes of imagery in your head, that's what I'm talking about, okay? When you have those, start to pay attention to what's going on. If you're meditating on a particular subject and you get particular imagery happening in your head, well, what are you meditating on? Are you meditating on yourself? Then it's information about you and about your situation, about the question that you were meditating on. So pay attention to those images and trust them. Usually the very first flash of an image that comes into your head, that's the juice right there. That's the important piece of information that you want to pay attention to. So that is the majority of what I would call clairvoyance, is not something that we see on the external, on the outside of people. That can be a little bit invasive. And, when that sort of turns on and I start seeing geometries and auras and things like that, I turn the volume knob down, because I don't need that in my walking around life. Sometimes it's kind of fun, but I don't really need to see that unless I'm in deep meditation. The internal sight, that's where you can get a lot of really useful information. And So the hard part is to learn how to interpret that information. So you do that by being curious. Ask yourself questions about, well, what does this mean to me? How is this relevant to the situation? What are the possible interpretations of this particular image? How does it fit into this context? So cultivate a sense of curiosity about yourself, what's going on for yourself. Don't immediately jump to the conclusion that you're going crazy or you're losing your marbles or any of that stuff. No, this is a perfectly natural function of a healthy human brain with your creativity and your sensory apparatus intact and active. Congratulations. You might be clairvoyant. There are people who don't get so much information from the visual position, but they get a feeling about things, or they feel things in their body. People who are often referred to as mystics have a sense of just knowing stuff. If you're a healer, a lot of people who are practitioners in alternative healing practices, whatever that might be, they learn to cultivate a sensory gift of clairsentience so they can feel what's going on in their client's body. And they know how to work. If you've ever been to a really good massage therapist, they're probably quite clairsentient. They know exactly where the knots are. They know exactly how deep to go to get it to release. It's not just because they're functioning from the intellect. They have a deep connection to what it feels like for you. So that's how they're working. I function quite a lot from clairsentience. Yes, I do feel other people's body sensations, but I'm also what you would call claircognizant or a mystic. So I guess in the immortal words of Tyrion Lannister, I smoke and I know things. That's little Game of Thrones humor. Okay, I'm a nerd. I'll admit it. But yes, knowing things, it's weird sometimes to trust yourself when you have that gift, because you often feel like, whoa, I should not be privy to that information. How do I know this? No, I'm just imagining that. And yet, more often than not, you find out after the fact that, oh yeah, I was right about that. And many of the things in my early years, a lot of issues in relationships, for example, very difficult to lie to me. I always know. I always know. So when you develop that gift, again, that's pretty handy because it's good to be able to know when somebody's lying to you. Now, depending on how wounded you are and where your wounding is, you might find yourself questioning, well, maybe they're not lying to me, or, but I don't want them to lie to me. I want them to be feeling or thinking or doing something different. So I'm going to lie to myself instead, even though your instincts might be screaming at you that there's something wrong, that you're being told an untruth. I think a lot of us have lived through that. So the trick with being a clairsentient or a claircognizant is to learn to trust the information that is coming in and to learn to understand the languaging of that information. If it's coming in the form of feelings in the body, well, if you want to identify what emotion that is for another person, you have to understand what that emotion is in you. And unfortunately, we are not a particularly emotionally literate culture. So, emotional literacy, I think, is something that should be taught to children to start with. and for them to understand, to be able to identify feelings in themselves, to understand why are they feeling that way and what to do with that feeling. But unfortunately, a lot of us grew up with pretty dysfunctional models as parents, and they did not process their emotions in healthy ways or even stop and talk about them. They just pretended that they weren't happening, or they would, have a tantrum that resembled a 2-year-old. That's certainly was my experience. I don't know how many other people have had the experience of witnessing a parent having a complete meltdown and screaming incoherently. Um, it's frightening for a child to experience that. And so, I think it's incumbent on us as adult humans that want to maybe have children, if you are in that position in your life, to develop some emotional literacy, because whatever you don't understand about yourself is potentially going to create problems for your children. And this is how generational trauma gets passed down. So, emotional literacy is really important, and just learning to trust yourself. What other gifts have we got? Psychic gifting, clairaudience. I also function quite a bit from clairaudience. I hear tones and frequencies. I have a pretty much constant soundtrack going in my head. I know I used to think that everybody had a soundtrack going in their head all the time. And apparently that's not the case. So if you're clairaudient, go ahead. Tell us how your clairaudience functions in the comments. It's interesting. Sometimes I just hear like bell-like tones or frequencies. Sometimes it's very discordant if it's something negative. Sometimes I can get emotional information from the tones. Sometimes I occasionally do hear actual words spoken. Sometimes I'll hear somebody's name and then a minute later they'll phone me. Or I'll hear somebody calling my name in their voice. I'll recognize the voice, and then the phone rings moments later, and it's that person. So on a clairaudient level, I heard their intention to phone me moments before the call came in. I already knew it was going to be them. I'm not the only person who has had this experience. I'm sure lots of you have had this experience. Many of us have had this experience. This is a pretty common one, actually. Apparently, the soundtrack in the head is less common. However, it is a fascinating way of getting information. So, if you can identify the song that is playing in your head, maybe you know the song, but you don't know what the lyrics are. You can't sing it off by heart, but you know what the song is. Look it up. Look up the lyrics. There will be some information in those lyrics for you. So sometimes it's really obvious what the song is referring to. Sometimes it's just background commentary. My higher self has quite the wicked sense of humor sometimes, and sometimes the soundtrack can be just outright hilarious. So, yeah, pay attention to whatever the soundtrack is that's in your head, if you have one. Sometimes my head will play music that I've never heard before. And that's also a fascinating thing. So what's going on there? Is it just the creative impulse? Is it music from other lifetimes? Certainly when I first started learning traditional West African djembe, I would often dream about rhythms. In my sleep, I would wake up with a rhythm in my head that I'd never learned, that I remembered from a dream. So, past lifetime memory? I can only suppose that yes, I tapped into some information on that level. But, you may be getting that kind of information as well when you have a dream that feels more like a memory than a dream. Maybe it is a memory. Maybe you're just tapping into the collective consciousness of that different timeline a different lifetime, a different point in history. I mean, time and space are just constructs. They're just intellectual constructs, really. So, what does that mean? If we are not in our consciousness restricted by the limits of time and space, what does that mean? Well, that means that we can access information from any timeline, from any universe or parallel reality that we can tune into. It's a question of frequency. Like I said, we are beings that function on electrical energy. We create electromagnetic fields and we carry frequency in our nervous system. Most of us are just walking around with like the static between channels. We don't have it tuned to any particular frequency. We're just unconsciously going about our day, just broadcasting static, whatever it is. Some, out of tune channel in a foreign language that we don't understand. Or really aggressive static. If you're in a really negative, low vibrational, emotional state, what are you broadcasting? I think we've probably all had the experience of encountering a friend and realizing, whoa, like what's going on with you? You seem really angry, or what happened? How do you know to ask that? Well, you feel something, you know something, maybe you see it in their facial expression. That also counts as sight as well. Being able to read and interpret micro expressions, yeah, that's part of being clairvoyant. It's a refinement of our visual sense. So what we think of as psychic giftings, which a lot of people would like to write off as being, oh, that's just woo-woo bullshit, it's not real, it doesn't really happen. No, it's an extension of our existing current senses. So don't make it wrong. Learn how to manage it. And enjoy it. Because, who doesn't need more information about the world that you're living in, the people that you're interacting with and connecting with in your life? Maybe even the places where you're living. We have a really strong sense of place. As social beings, we want to connect with each other, but we also want to be connected to the places that we live, to the earth. We have cottages or a particular place in nature that we really love, that we feel really deeply spiritually connected to. All of the ancient holy places and the feeling of the energy that you get when you go and stand on the ground in those places. There's a palpable energy that you can tune into. The sense of reverence, of maybe centuries of reverence that you feel coming up through the stone floors of, an ancient cathedral or something. Some of those ancient structures that have had generations of worship or sacred practice, those places carry quite a strong energy. And we are capable of tuning into that and connecting to that. We're also very capable of tuning into negative energy in a place. You ever have the experience of moving into an apartment or a home, or even just going to a patch of land and you're like, something bad happened here. You can feel it. You can feel the old leftover energy, the emotions, the grief, the despair, the fear, the rage, whatever it is. There are places where you can pick up that kind of psychic information. And if you don't want to be living in a place that has all that kind of psychic information, you can get the space cleared. There are techniques for clearing the energy from those kinds of spaces. So again, this is something that I do. I do space clearings. I set up energy constructs where you want to build a sacred space for yourself in your new home or your new business, whatever it is, your cottage space, whatever sacred space you are wanting to sanctify and keep the energy clear in. So there are lots of ways of doing this, but it's something that can be done. You don't have to say no to a place that is perfect in every respect, except I don't like the way the energy feels. That can be taken care of. The walls are falling down, that's a lot more expensive. Getting the energy cleared, piece of cake. So that's a little bit about psychic gifting. Again, if you have questions about that, of what's coming up for you, how to turn the information down, the volume is a little bit too much, it's overwhelming, it's interfering with your daily life. Yeah, there are techniques for doing that. I will address that in another episode. And drop your questions below. Share how your gifting shows up for you, how you use it, if you have any kind of techniques. That might be helpful to other viewers as well. So please feel free to share. And if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful day. Wonderful to spend time with you as always.